Hello world, welcome to my channel. I'm Bound to Be Coding. In this series of quick tutorials, I show you a feature of my game and then I tell you how it's made. Today's feature is part 2 on my previous show and tell where I demonstrated how to create a load and save system using dictionaries converted to JSON and then stored as encrypted binary files. You're welcome to take a look at that video if you're interested. In this video is just a quick follow-up to talk about something I didn't mention, and that is how to deal with polymorphism while serializing and deserializing the data. Let's get started. In case you haven't watched the previous video, just a quick recap here. I'm using C# 12, .NET 8. I am using C# dictionaries, Microsoft's JSON library, System Text JSON, Godot direct access or directory access, and security cryptography. Let's jump right in. Okay, so we are in my game, A Struggle to Survive, and I am sitting in a region 2.7, and I'm going to move to the right, which is going to take me into the next region. And when I go from one region to another, I have dictionary data that is region specific, that is going to get saved when I leave this region. And then when I go into the next region, if that region exists, if I've been there before and it exists, then that region data is going to get loaded. Otherwise, it's going to generate a fresh new region and I can move around until I'm ready to leave to go to the next region. Now, when I do that, I'm going to be loading the region data. I've already been to the region to the east of this region. I'm going to go back, and when I go back, we're going to step through and I'm going to show you something that's very necessary when it comes to deserializing any kind of data that's using polymorphism. So we'll come in here, we'll jump over, and this is in the loading of my dictionaries, and I'm down to where I have my first instance of polymorphism. Now, in case you don't know what polymorphism is, it just simply means, poly means many, morph, many types, many variations, and essentially what polymorphism is in C# is the ability to take a base class, set it up, and then inherit from that class in another class. So here we have a class here, structure, and this is my base class. So in my game, I have structures that appear in the world, and there's different kinds of structures. Each structure has different properties. For example, a campfire is different from a lean-to, which is different from a beaver lodge, but they're all structures. They all inherit from structure. And if you look here, my beaver dam instance, for example, it has two properties that are unique to beaver dam instance, size and is vertical. Whereas if we take a look at the lodge, we have population and size. Those are the unique properties to my beaver lodge. And if I were to go down to campfire, which has many more properties to it, I'm allowed to have these properties in campfire but inherit from structure, which means I pick up all of the properties of structure, which are my vector2i, which is the ID, which is essentially the tile that the structure is sitting on in my game world, my tile map. And then I have a structure type, and then I have a scene name, a method here, which isn't important. But the main thing that I want to focus on here is to understand how polymorphism works when it comes to deserializing. Okay, so if we go back to my game engine, so here we have the structured data that we're going to be loading from the dictionary. I'm going to go ahead and run that, and when I run it, it's going to allow me to see what that JSON data looks like. Now, I've already pulled that data, and so let me jump down here. And this is what it looks like. Okay, so this is my structure dictionary deserialized back into JSON data. And I want you to notice that we have inside of this a property or a node in our JSON called $type. Now that's not part of my class. That is something that the JSON serializer added. And essentially what happens is when you're dealing with polymorphism, being able to deserialize objects that are different in the dictionary, and in my case, I have a vector2i as my key, and I have an object which is of type structure, but it also has other types that are inherited from structure. And the way system text JSON handles that polymorphic behavior is to associate each one of the types that are my inherited classes. Each one of those gets its own type designation, and that's what this line here is for. Type is actually I've got a note here, it is the default, so if I could technically remove that and it would still work. I leave it in here because it reminds me that, hey, if I want to, I can change that to something other than type and it would still work just fine. But the important thing is that when system text JSON is trying to serialize and deserialize a polymorphic scenario where we have a class that's inherited by another class, in order to understand the differences in the data structure of the JSON, because remember, JSON is just string data, in order to be able to manage the differences and to understand what these objects need to be deserialized back into, system text JSON uses a type discriminator property. And so when it serializes, it adds type to the file and saves it out. And then when it deserializes and it loads that back, it takes a look at that property, that $type property, and it says, okay, what type is this? Oh, this is type 0. Okay, then that is a campfire instance. And it knows to deserialize all the properties that are in the file that are associated with the campfire instance. Same with all the other types. And by having that type designator, it's able to properly understand the string data that is represented by or that represents all of these different types in the game. Now, this is really the only thing you need to do to set up polymorphic deserialization, with the exception of one more thing that I'll show you in just a minute. But this is really all you have to do. You just have to make sure that you have a JSON-derived type, and that type is the class that's inheriting your base class, along with a type designator, which in this case I'm saying it's an integer, it's a 0, and then a 1, 2, 3, and so on. And then it will go ahead and handle the serializing and the deserializing and get your types the way they need to be when you're reconstructing the dictionary from the JSON data. Now, when I first started looking at this, I got really confused because I actually have a type designator in my structure class. It is called structure type, and it is an enum. I don't store it in my dictionary as an enum. I store it just as an integer value, and I convert the enum value back to an integer when I use it. But I thought, well, since I already have a type, and since you can name this whatever you want, I tried to name it structure type. That did not work. And digging around Microsoft's website, I found out that they actually have it intentionally set up that way, that you do not want the type discriminator to match a property name that's already in your class. And yeah, that makes sense because they can't both be named structure type. So that gave me a little bit of a hiccup, but once I realized that, this one I'm using myself in the game, and this one system text JSON is using to manage the polymorphic deserialization, then I understood, okay, then once I set this up, it worked beautifully. All right, so that's the first thing that you need to do to make sure you have polymorphic deserialization set up for your inherited classes in your JSON data. There's one other thing that I want to cover. Going back to here, we have our structured data, which is, this is the JSON. I've shown you the type embedded. And once we do that, we come in here to the method that actually basically returns the dictionary. It takes that raw string data that is now in JSON format, and it brings it back in here. And this converter, you can watch my first video on this. This converter allows the vector2i to be handled because system text JSON doesn't know what a Godot vector2i is. So we covered that in the first video. But I don't need to do anything with the polymorphic de-serialization except to make sure that the type that is getting deserialized is not the inherited type, but the base type. And that's very important. The base type structure, in my case, is the type that we are deserializing back. And if you try to deserialize it to a different class other than your base class, it isn't going to work correctly. So the structure class is decorated to handle the JSON polymorphic type and to handle all of your derived classes. And that's the one that you want to deserialize, serialize and deserialize, and it'll take care of it for you automatically. And so we continue, and it brings me back into the game, and I can come over here and I can see that there's my beaver dam and there's my beaver lodge. You say, what's a beaver lodge? Well, I guess most of us, unless we've studied it, think that beavers live in their dams. They don't. They live in a lodge just off the dam, somewhere off the dam itself. And so just a little bit of history that I've learned as I've worked on this game, A Struggle to Survive. That's really it. That's all there is to polymorphic serialization and deserialization using system text JSON. And if you're wondering how fast this is, it is blazingly fast, incredibly fast. And I think I showed some numbers in the first video. You're welcome to take a look at that. All right, that's all I have for you on this video. Thank you for watching. If you would like to subscribe and continue following along as I work on my game, A Struggle to Survive, a 2D survival game set in 1820 early America, Rocky Mountain, rendezvous season era time frame, you're welcome to do that. And if you like this video, if you found it helpful, please give me a thumbs up. And until next time, I'm bound to be coding.